How do you know when to fire someone or when to keep them on? This is one of the biggest questions that I get asked. So what we're going to cover in this video is the exact framework that I use to know if I should let someone go, if I should fire them, or maybe it's me that's the problem. So here's the thing. The reality is that when we have an issue with an employee, we always get frustrated. Say, they didn't do a close properly last night, or say they're late, or say, just stuff's not getting done, right? And so then you have to step in, you have to fill in. It's frustrating, right? So our first instinct is to blame the person. Right? This is our first instinct. Anyway, our first instinct is to blame the person. How could they do that? How did they know not to mop the floors last night? Like, why can't they do that? How did they know, or why didn't they clean the mirror properly? How come they didn't do the dishes properly? Whatever the case is, right? We always blame them and we're frustrated. We're like, they should know how to do this. Does nobody know how to work anymore? Like, this is the kind of stuff that we hear all the time, right? So first thing we do is blame the person. But what I actually do, and this is my framework, is instead we actually need to look at the process first. So we go here. So the questions I have around the process is I want to make sure a few things are in place just to double check ourselves. Because again, if there's a legit reason why they didn't do whatever it is that they're supposed to do, we want to solve that, because then just canning the person will basically mean that we'll hire someone else and they'll end up in the same place. And then we'll end up just going and doing this again and again, never getting where we want to go. So first question I ask is, okay, is the process clear? So here's an example of this. I use a story all the time about coming in and seeing mirrors that people tried to clean, but they used like a bar towel or degreaser instead of Windex and paper towel. So what I say, is the process clear? So for example, does it say on the checklist, clean bathroom mirror with Windex and paper towel? Is it that level of clear where there's no misinterpreting it? If you came in off the street and you saw that, you're like, okay, I'm going to be able to do that. That's the level of clarity that we need, because common sense isn't common to someone who's never done it before, right? And some of the employees we hire these days might never have mopped a floor or swept a floor before. That's a reality, right? So we have to make sure the process is clear. It is a clear expectation. They know exactly what should be done. Now, if it is clear, the next thing we ask them, is it recent? And so what I mean by that is, say for example, you cover this thing on orientation day 1, which is that you're supposed to show up, 10 minutes before your shift, for example. You cover that on day 1, and then you don't say anything about it until 3 months in their employment, and they come in 1 minute before their shift, and you're like, I'm going to write you up for not being 10 minutes early for your shift. And they're going to be like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been doing this the entire time I've worked here. Why do I get a write-up now? Like, I didn't know that. And even though you may have explained it, did you explain it recently? Was it a recent conversation that you had? Because if all of a sudden, if it's not top of mind or front of their mind when they're working, you can't really hold them accountable for that, right? Oh, they should just know because I told them one time. Well, guess what? People only remember about 10% of what we hear. So we need to make sure that's recent. So number 1, is it clear? Is it something that, they've done and then we reminded them of it? So then the next time it happens, we can move down the pipeline, right? So after we know that it's clear and we know that it's recent, then what we can start to do is look at any other roadblocks. Okay. So here's the next thing. So for example, is it reasonable that they actually did the thing that they were supposed to do? So, say for example, their sales were 10 times as high as what it should have been. Of course, the close wasn't going to be as great. We don't want to start giving them write-ups because they were handed way too much volume and didn't have the staffing to be able to properly complete it. So we have to make sure it's clear, recent, and then was there anything that was actually in the way? Oh, they didn't mop the floor because there was no floor cleaner available. That is a legitimate thing, right? So they, probably used whatever, but it's not going to look as good. So once we go through those things, then we can move over to the person. Okay. Now, the reason we can do this now is because we know that they should reasonably know what to do. We've reminded them of it recently, and there was nothing in the way of them doing it. So the fact is, they just didn't do it. And so this is where we start to blame the person and go down this checklist. So the first thing I do is I start with a verbal convo. And so basically it's like, hey man, so, I noticed that you didn't mop the floors last night. We need to get this done. This is part of the job. It says it right here. I checked, everything was in line last night. You had everything you needed to do it. So this needs to get done in the future, okay? Because again, we've already had one time where we've reminded them of it. So we do that, and after this, the ball's in their court. Either they are going to pick it up and run with it or not. That is no longer on you, because I used to stay up at night being like, did I give them enough chances? Like, is there anything else I could have done? Because I'm a nice person, and honestly, we probably give people way too many chances. But once we know that all of this is in line, then we start going down into your warnings. So this convo, that was actually your verbal warning, right? So then we go into written warning, and then we go into termination. So the thing is, once we've actually gone through the process, we've had the conversation with them, then we give them a written warning about it. After that, that's it. They're done. And the reason we do this is because we've given them every opportunity. We did everything we could. You cannot control whether someone will do that. You can't control the economy. You can't control the weather. You can't control if someone is actually going to do their job the way that they should be. All you can do is provide them the opportunity to do so, give them all the tools, give them all the training, make sure they know how to do everything. But then at the end of the day, it will be up to them whether they do it or not. And so the only choice you're left with after you are here is moving on and getting another person into the business that will do what they need to do. And that's it. So this is the process that I coach my clients on. This is the process that I use in my own organization. And so again, we like to be people first. We like to make sure we give them every opportunity. But at a certain point, you need your standards to be upheld, because if your standards aren't as high that are going to move the business forward, they start to go down. And then guess what? Other people will start to fall down that path as well. So there's a saying I like to use that people don't rise to the level of your expectations, they fall to the level of your accountability. And this is the accountability piece, because if they see Bobby over there and Bobby's not doing his job, well, why should I work twice as hard and pick up all of his slack if we're getting paid the same? You shouldn't. Right? So what we need to make sure that happens is Bobby doesn't work here anymore, and we get someone else in here who will do the job. And then that level of standards and that level of accountability will allow us to grow as an organization and free you up in your time, in your business, so you can focus on the more important things like growing your sales, opening up new locations, instead of always getting sucked back down and fixing problems that, let's face it, other people should have solved. Right. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. But try using this now. But first, go through the framework. Did I do everything I could? And then once you know that you did, the ball's in their court.